mean, she did silly stuff like Bella did, like walking by yourself in the garden or something like that. And that's exactly when she got caught. And it's just like, girl, seriously? You are in a mansion, like surrounded. They can't get you inside. Why would you go out? I'm sorry, it's spoilers. I'm sorry. But it's just anyway. There's a lot wrong with that book.
What is your favorite werewolf movie?
Is there a werewolf movie?
Favorite werewolf movie?
Teen Wolf.
Oh,
Teen Wolf.
I just
stopped talking to Amanda for a minute. Okay, guys.
No. I just watched that the other day because we were bored as hell and didn't know what to watch.
Was it good?
I watched it with my husband and I was like, this is so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. But it was one of those like nostalgic, let's hate watch this movie kind of moments. So it's not really one of my favorites.
So not the series, the actual movie with
the movie Michael J. Fox.
Michael J. Fox, yes. I've been so long since I know they did a TV series, which I think the CW did it. So the chances are the actors are attractive, but they didn't really worry about the writing as hard because the focus. But I hear a lot of people enjoyed it. I haven't watched it myself.
Are you talking about the series?
Did you watch it?
Yeah, I watched like the first couple seasons. It was all right. It was pretty good to me.
What did the werewolves look like?
Then
That's always the bad part for me. Is how they make the werewolves look. Like, did they look like a wolf? Did it make them look like a Pomeranian? Like, what happened? Because that does, unfortunately.
So I just looked up some because I went blank. I remember, where'd it go? Ginger Snaps. Do y'all remember that movie? That was good. That was a really good movie. I haven't seen it in a long time though. There's like 1 and 2, I think. The rest of these are like Twilight and A Werewolf in Paris. I don't know. Let's talk about
Underworld had werewolves.
And those were well done werewolves. Like I was very appreciative of what the werewolves, like they looked like wolves who could have turned into humans and vice versa. Because sometimes there was that one they did the Wolfman with the Puerto Rican actor, what's his name? God, I can't remember, but whatever the case was, they had everything was so good about that movie, and then it got to the very end where he became a werewolf, and whoever did the werewolves for that clearly were like, and we're going to make them look like a chow, and a scary chow though. And then the movie progressed, and then you're just like, why, y'all? Why? And it was so aggravating because the movie was so good up until then, and you're just like I don't understand why it's so hard to get consistent werewolves. Like it's very weird.
I mean, if you're going to play with the different appearances, then like set up for it. Like I think for the most part, people have generally this kind of same idea about what a werewolf would probably look like. Maybe not specifically, but in a general sense. So they're expecting a wolf of some sort, or it being humanoid, but then you bust out with, "Hey, look at this child." Like, and I'm okay with that as long as you set up for it. Because I was just sitting here thinking, in terms of werewolves, if they're like canines, then why hasn't there been like an evolution or deviation to where these werewolves started changing into like your modern day dogs? Like, why isn't that a thing? Since, I'm just saying.
I need you to write that story, Brittny, because that sounds excellent. Like, I need somebody to go to a pound and adopt a werewolf and not realize it. Like, that's like the best story in my life.
That would be hilarious. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
But I mean, just think, if you can think about things like that, that provides like unique takes on the same thing. It can provide conflict because now there's always going to be that, well, we're purebloods, we're the original wolves, y'all are less than us, and then there's this whole rivalry and feud and stuff going on, blah, blah, blah. So there's room for conflict, there's room for exploration. Like, just that's what I would like people to do. And that's why I don't really care for vampire and werewolf type stuff anymore, is because it's all the same thing. And typically is either extremely gory or it's more romance than, you know, paranormal. And I'm not about all that lying. It's fine if it's in there, but come on, let there still be a good story underneath.
I think so. I have this like, I had this idea kind of bouncing around that I might play with one day, but it's kind of like, it is a werewolf tale where you have like kind of like a pack of werewolves, but it's a family, and one person in the family isn't a werewolf. Like they can't turn into a werewolf, because it feels like, you know, when there's a pack, they're all able to turn. Nobody has any issues. There's no like, this person is only able to turn halfway, or they can't turn on a Friday when everybody else can. And so I think kind of playing with the idea of like, what do you do when you're the odd one out and you can't turn into a werewolf? Everybody else can, and when they're a wolf, they don't see you as one of them. So like, how do you kind of navigate that? I think that would be like an interesting kind of thing to play with. But you know, I think in this case they will actually be wolves. I don't know that I'll like want them to turn into dachshunds or something.
I think
But that's interesting though, because then like the first question that popped up into my mind when you were saying that is, okay, so this werewolf can't transform into their animal form essentially. So then what's their diet like? Since they're now in human form basically permanently, as far as I know, what's their diet like? Do they still eat raw meat? Can they eat roadkill, or do they have to, or can they eat regular human food, and that will allow them to blend into human society since they feel ostracized from their pack, like that sort of thing. And then if he or she tries to blend into human society and they still have the cravings of like their werewolf pack, raw meat, blood, and all that jazz, what kind of conflict will come about then if they have to partake of raw meat? Or if they're like extremely hungry and the only thing that's there is a roadkill, will they eat that in front of their human friends?
Yeah. All things to, so when I write this, I'm going to call you and we're going to have a brainstorming session.
Like, you should charge for that service, Brittny, because nobody else asks questions like you do. Like 100%.
For sure,
It generates conflict. It generates other ideas, and that could potentially make the story even more interesting, or help to just make it seem more real or plausible, even though it's werewolves. Still, within the story world, it makes it a bit more plausible about how can this person navigate this society and that society, and just I don't know, just different things.
I will say that one of the things that the Vampire Diaries did really well was their werewolves, because they hardly ever went, I guess, full werewolf with their characters. They knew that there was this kind of line where they were like, maybe we shouldn't leave them in this form for too long. And so they made them like, they gave them the teeth, of course, and their eyes changed color. They gave you just enough to understand that a change was happening. And then they kept it moving from there. They'll cut away from the scene and you'll hear some wolves like howling in the distance. You'll see some wolves, but you may not see that character as a wolf. And even still, you understand that is a werewolf. They don't look like Pomeranians or Chows, but we understand that a change is taking place and we're going to keep rolling with that. And I did appreciate that about them. Like I said, not everybody. The American Werewolf in Paris did a really good job with their werewolves. Like, I didn't have any complaints about theirs. I'm trying to think who else. There were a couple that I was just like, I'm not a werewolf aficionado like Latedra over there is, but I'm am going to say that I'm probably pickier about werewolves than I should be. You know.
What do you think about the werewolf transformations? Like, there's been so many like different versions, and people always want.
I don't like them when they're too smooth.
What happens to the clothes? That's my first question. What happens to the clothes?
Now, Damn.
Like, do they just up and disappear when they transform? Like, is there hammer space somewhere, or do they like as I would expect to either get ripped up or fall off, or like what happened?
Could you focus on their love triangle like they want you to, and not worry about that?
I remember when I first started writing werewolves, though, my characters, when they transformed into werewolves, like their clothes would like from magic, like their clothes would determine how their fur would look when they were transforming. But yeah, don't worry about that story. I had them all kind of stuff. Like one was I had some of them like with elements. Or one when they transform, like their skin resembled grass, and stuff like that. I don't know what I was doing, but that was one of them.
But I mean, like, honestly, I probably would take sort of the anime-ish approach and let like there be levels, like your ultimate super powerful, I guess level would be your complete wolf, four-legged wolf transformation. The middle level would be your human wolf hybrid looking form, and then there's your typical everyday human appearance. Like,
I don't want them to take too long though. Like in the Mercy Thompson series, like I feel like they take too long to transform. Like by the time they finish transforming, like I feel like, well, in the book she says that it's only like a matter of seconds, but when she's describing it, it seems like it's taking minutes and it's painful. So then you have to like not only deal with the pain of that, but you have to be like straight like on as soon as you finish, because the threat is like coming at you. So I don't want them to take too long to transform.
Cassandra in the chat asked, and when they have clothes, how do they find new ones once? And that's very true. Like even if you can't hammer space your clothes, like Brittny said, where are you picking up new ones? Are you breaking in somewhere and grabbing
somebody did one where they would actually, I can't remember who this was, but they would like, and it might have been Mercy Thompson too, like they would carry like a knapsack on them, or they would stash clothes in like a certain part of like the woods that they're like familiar with. They would like change them. They would change into those clothes then.
I feel like they did that in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where when Oz would change, he would have like a backpack with him or something. Because I remember.
I completely forgot about that series, and you brought up like, yeah, Buffy.
Because I remember like when I think I remember seeing when Oz would change, where he would like go into the cage in the library, and he always had his backpack. Now, you know, it was a school, so that could be wrong. But I think that was one of the things that, so about the change, one of the questions that I keep thinking about is how much control do they have over their changing? Because I think in a lot of the lore, it's like it only happens during a full moon and whatnot. And I think that's cool, but it kind of takes away their agency. So where this thing happens to them and it's not them and they're not in control of this thing like themselves. And so then when they do change, I think that makes it all the more painful because they're not in control, and it's like, this thing is happening to me, like when you have a stomach flu, like you're just not in control and it's just happening to you. Mm-hmm. But then if it is something that they're able to control, how long will they take to master it, right? And if they're a kid, is it more painful? Or if you're a 70-year-old man, have you mastered it and then you don't think about it, like it's just something that happens and it's not painful for you anymore? How does that work? So that's kind of what I think about, is like, what level of control would the werewolves have?
Sorry for the werewolf that has arthritis.
Oh.
Cassandra Moore said, I wonder if they steal the clothes from the clotheslines while they're drying. I would, too. What's mine is yours and what's yours is mine. Like today is that day. Oh, and I need them more than you do.
You end up with like an I'm a stupid shirt or something because you ain't checking for what's on the line.
Nobody's getting a free show on my watch.
To piggyback on what Amanda said, like the Vampire Diaries, again, they they do a pretty good job with that too. Like so Tyler, he turns into a vampire, into a werewolf. Like he doesn't have a choice in it, right? And so he decides he'll be his sire. He was sired to Klaus, because Klaus turned him. So he decided to, more stuff happened, blah, blah, blah. But basically he decided to break that sire bond by transforming over and over and over again, even though it was painful, even though it was hard. And it's a lot harder, like without the full moon. But he still decides to keep on doing it and keep on doing it to break that bond. So, and then you see him like trying to do all the other werewolves that are sired to Klaus the same way. So, yeah, I forgot the whole point, but I remember I wanted to say that.
Question about the transformation. Oh, go ahead, Sheena.
So what I find weird about Werewolf Society is that they're very autonomous. Like, with vampires, there's a coven, there's like a hierarchy. They're like the Catholic Church, but vampires. But with werewolves, they're just like, well, I'm out here werewolfing and I'm werewolfing by myself. There's some other werewolves. I may or may not be in a pack. I might be a lone wolf, but they don't seem to like being like cohesive units unless they absolutely have to be. And I don't necessarily understand why that. You would think that the community would make that an easier transition. They're like, nah, we don't want none of that. Good.
But didn't Mercy Thompson address that? I only read the first book, so
I haven't read the
They
book.
they were a cohesive unit. They weren't separated. I mean, they had
different factions, like in different cities and stuff. And you're supposed to, if you're like a new wolf, then you're supposed to check in with that local faction, basically. And if not, and they find you, you're going to have to answer to them anyway. So they don't like loners roaming around.
Because the loners would eventually like go crazy, and then they would have to be sent to Bran, who is like the godfather of werewolves. And like that was like the last option. Like if he couldn't fix the loner wolf mind going crazy, like they would then kill him.
Yeah, so he would get put down.
Did they have powers in this particular book?
No, they had like the standard one who may have had powers. They kind of hint at his Bran because he's so old, and then his son also because of his heritage. But otherwise, like their werewolves are like just basically normal. Like they super strength, super like nice build, they're all built different. They're all not all these like stocky guys that's walking around here. And there's women in the hierarchy, even though like so crazy. Mercy comes in and changes stuff though.
Oh,
that's why she's my girl.
Like I feel that look fit me.
No, before she gets in there into the whole like pack and like she really like. You could be like an alpha woman, but if your husband was like beta, you were considered beta or gamma or whatever it is. Like you couldn't assert your alpha and decide that you want to be like second or something. And so like she came in and she was just like, this ain't working.
I did not interpret that like that at all. Mercy got on my nerve. Like she set me up. Because after the first chapter, when she like went and took on that weird werewolf or whatever that was trying to transform and was having a difficult time, and she, spoiler alert, basically killed it in the street or whatever, I was like, yeah, this is about to be good. And then it flatlined after that. And like for me, it just flatlined. Like all she did that I felt was kind of like whine and boast about how she killed the werewolf, even though she's a coyote and all this. Sorry for the spoilers, but I was just like, and then the climax.
We got two different interpretations of that book. I love Mercy Thompson. I read it all the time.
Like nothing happened really after that for me. It's just her. Sorry for the spoilers. If you don't want spoilers, please mute your thing for a little while I read.
He's like, you gonna get this read.
Don't be doing spoilers.
After what's his face? What's the character name that was like the local head honcho of werewolves? The one that got shot 11 times by tranquilizers.
Oh, he got what? What is his name?
I don't remember his name, but anyway, he got all beat up, and then like the whole middle of the book was just her transporting him, waiting on him to get better so they can go right back to the situation, and then they like played up Brian's son, like he's supposed to be like just this super powerful, you
gotta keep reading. It's so good.
Like, and
it's
then he
so
does
good.
nothing.
They all have like backstories that are just so amazing. I'm sorry.
I'm here for the backstory. She said, "Nah,
I'm not getting that far. You should have had that up front."
I don't like
like an impulse dump.
I like the smooth. I like her personality more than anything. Like, of course, there's parts in the book that lag, but to me, her personality and how she deals with the situations was great. Like, it's not something that I had seen before in urban fantasy. So when I read it, I was like, oh, okay. Because she was like a regular, like, human who just happened to change into a coyote. And it was like, well, what would a human do in this situation? Okay, I'm going to go and take him to the person that I know can help him. So to me, that was like, oh, yeah, okay. I would do that.
Yeah, I don't mind that, but I don't want the whole middle of the book to be that journey, and then it's like, can we have something else happening in between here? Like, okay, we get it. We wait for him to get better. Okay, let's go to something else. Like, anyway, sorry, what were you saying?
Was there a love triangle in this book in particular?
Yes. It was her ex, because he started to come back, and I guess implying that he wants to get back with her. And then the local pack leader of her town, which he, spoiler alert again, kisses at the end, even though the ex is staying with her in her trailer.
Yeah. She's like, oh yeah, that did happen.
But they grew up together, like, you know what I mean? Like, they grew up together in a pack, unofficially in a pack. And so, like, of course, you're going to have people going back home. You're going to have people that you used to date at your hometown and stuff like that. Of course, they're going to resurface at some point. Like, right, you know what I mean? Like, I can't go to my old neighborhood and don't expect to see, like, an ex or two or somebody at some point.
Yeah, so but she went to the ex's neighborhood, and then the ex came back with her to her neighborhood.
What's right? It's so good.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So with the paranormal things that are happening, do you feel like there is a place for those type of love triangles with all of the changing and the learning of powers and the hierarchies that you're having? Do you feel like it's normal for them to have the kind of time to worry about those things?
You asking me or?
And the whole room. Feel free.
I think y'all tries to do it, but honestly, it gets tiring and it gets boring. I mean, I guess they have a love triangle for a bit, but she quickly like lets that go. So for me, like in Ya, I think it happens a lot. Like they do the love triangle thing, and that kind of turned me off. One of the reasons why it turned me off from Ya, because I don't want a love triangle thing. I don't want like a will they, won't they with like two different guys. Like you in high school, like let's not do this.
I like when it's just like a situationship where it's just like this isn't going to be love. There's a flirtation happening. Maybe they do it, who knows? But the understanding isn't that like this is going to be something where they love each other, or where it's, you know, generally not a fan of like toxic relationships, but where it's kind of that like they hate each other, but also you know that they're getting it in on the side kind of thing. I like that, but I can also understand when you're tuning into a book or show for the paranormal aspect and you want to see the magic and you want to see the you know, vampires biting and the werewolves turning, and then it's like you don't have time for him to be talking to Becky next door, because that kind of takes it away. And a lot of times if it's not written well, that becomes the focus. Yeah. Like I do like Vampire Diaries, and I like kind of like that whole like Stefan, Elena, Damon thing, but there were times where it pulled focus to where you're more focused on their relationship than she's in a human in the sea of all these vampires. How is it that she's having this love triangle with two vampires who could kill her? And why isn't she like liking one vampire is enough, but two vampires?
Just two? Greedy.
Multiple vampires, like the same thing with True Blood. You know,
it becomes unrealistic.
Yeah.
You know? It's like you say you don't want all this drama, but you keep piling all this drama
inviting it in
on yourself. Yeah, it's like why would you do that?
And I think that that's also the writing where when you have that female male centric thing where it's like the normal girl that's not like anybody else. Well, yes, she is, because she brings drama. Everybody, like, you know what I mean? Like in Vampire Diaries, most of the season was them saving her from shit. In Twilight, she's clumsy as hell. She's not like every other girl. Every girl's clumsy. Like, I don't know why you're making this seem like her standout feature. And then, you know, so I think just to harp on the love, I think it takes you away from the story, especially if it's not done well.
I have a very silly question. Like, vampires are, well, I guess old school vampires are essentially the living dead, correct? So you mean to tell me that you like loving on a corpse? I'm just asking.
So, Brittny.
Like, if the creature, like that, like, at what point does a vampire stop being a...
That's probably why you don't get it.
Like, at what point does a vampire stop being a vampire? Because if they're no longer the living dead, then, like, because there are all these different variations, and I'm not mad at it, but at what point does it stop being a vampire? At what point does it stop? Because initially, they could only come out at night, they couldn't deal with sunlight, they couldn't deal with crosses in holy water and garlic and all that jazz. So now, as time goes on, all these weaknesses get stripped away, leaving only basically the good stuff, which is the super strength, and the not so good thing having to suck blood. So, at what point do they stop being vampires then, and just instead they're just parasitic creatures?
I think that they evolve as we humans evolve. They evolve too with our imaginations, because you have to think about, like, when vampires like first came around, like nobody thought about half the things that we've read about so far, right? Nobody had that imagination to look this far ahead and see it. So I think as we grow, yeah, we want to expand that universe. We want to expand these creatures. Look, you got me saying it. We want to expand these like vampires and werewolves and things like that we hadn't explored before. And to leave it as just like they're going to be like these horrible creatures for the rest of their life or for the rest of our lives, to me, it stifles your creativity to a certain point. Like, I get it. I get like how they were like back then, but we can't. I feel like we can't get stuck on like who they were. Like, it was great for that era, for that time that they were there. They were these big scary monsters, and you know, but now, like, especially like in the age of now, like people don't want to always see such scary creatures everywhere. You can make them scary enough, but seriously, oh yeah, Sheena, I'm sorry.
I like monsters, bad guys to be bad guys and monsters. Like, I'm fine with someone being a complete sociopath because that's who that character is. Like, they don't have to be empathetic. Yeah. Sorry. Okay.
I think if that's their role though, but still, like, we sometimes, like, now we write from the creature's point of view. And so where before like people were just writing from like humans seeing these creatures and these monsters, and like you said earlier, not understanding their nature. And so now we get a viewpoint of the actual werewolf vampires themselves living in these worlds, and how can we make them monsters if they don't believe that they're monsters? You know what I mean? Not everybody is writing from the human's point of view, looking at the werewolf or whatever. I mean, sometimes like the romance does like get in the way, but like done right, we are looking at vampires and werewolves from their point of view. And if they don't think they're monsters, we're not gonna write them that way. That's my 2 cents. So Sheena's like, nah.
No, but I mean, she does have a point, and I don't mind that because if you're in another person's shoes, if you're a different person, then they're going to think they're automatically right in how they're behaving, and that goes back to what I mentioned before about vampires. A vampire that's born and raised in a vampire society where they can just go and it's normal for them to go and snatch a human off the street and take them back home and suck their blood until they're dead. So that isn't wrong within that culture. It starts to become a problem when you start exposing yourself to a different culture that's just as large, if not larger, that has a different moral compass, and they take pride on life. So of course they're not going to think that they're wrong because this is normal. This is what we have to do to live. This is our normal society. But when you go and meet these people, they're like, nah, that's not normal. Yeah. And it's not that either is inherently wrong or bad, but this is just how life is for them as they grew up. So I'm not disagreeing, but it was just like, at what point, I guess for me, because like Sparkling Vampire was just it for me.
I think we all know that Sparkling Vampires was wrong.
And it's like, could you just, I would have been fine with it. I would have been okay to some extent with it if she called them blood-sucking fairies. Like, I would have been fine.
It's not as succinct as vampires, though. Like, vampires, one word, and then you have blood-sucking fairies. That's a whole lot.
Just come up with something.
I mean, they could have been fairies, though. They had, like, the powers and all that stuff.
Because weren't fairies initially, like, the old school fairies, like, just, didn't they drink blood?
I think some did.
Like, because they were scary, I think, the old school fairies.
Most of them could be wrong
back, by the way.
We need to bring those back.
I think it's also just,
we have a show coming up like that.
Let me find out. I'm gonna be there. I think it's also though, like the big thing has to do with world building, but also kind of honoring what has happened in the past and honoring the lore, and then trying to forge your own path. And at where is the kind of the sweet spot of that and the apex of that, right? Because we've all seen stuff like with Twilight, with the Sparkling Vampires, where it's a bridge too far, where you're like, okay, I see you trying to be innovative, but you just turn this thing that we're all, I think part of the appeal of vampires, even when they are in this like love thing, is that they're slightly dangerous, right? It's a bad boy or bad girl or bad non-binary kind of thing. And when you have where there's sparkle, and the only creepy thing about Edward is that he legitimately is a freaking stalker creeper person and not the vampireness, it makes you wonder, like, why did he have to be a vampire in the first place? He could have just been a normal human, and we would have been like, we would not have missed the vampireness of him. And so I think it's finding that place where you can honor some of the lore, but then kind of carving your own path with it and being consistent with the world building. One of the things that bugs me is when people are inconsistent with the world building. This is one of the things that bugged me. I'm not sure if you all saw the Dracula like BBC show, but
yes, the one with the guy from Ireland. I can't remember his name, but that's the one you're talking about, I think.
Yeah, it was like a 3-part series of Dracula. There are moments that I liked. I certainly liked that they turned Abraham Van Helsing into a woman. Like, that character was badass. She was amazing. But there were just other things that I didn't like, and that the writers of the show kept only, like, the line in Dracula where he says, "I don't drink," line, and that's supposed to be a cheeky like, we know he's a vampire, but they used it 3 or 4 times to where by the time he had said it the 4th time, you're like, okay, girl, we know you don't drink wine, we know you drink blood, like you don't have to keep putting this in the script. And you know, they would have where at one point in the show, you know, when he was older and hadn't had blood, he had one accent, and then by the end he had another, and it was kind of supposed to be like he takes on the life force and kind of being of the people he drains, but that doesn't happen with all of the people that he drains. So it's just like all of these inconsistencies, which take you out of the story, number one, and number two, make your villain not scary, and I can't take it seriously because you can't take it serious. You're not taking this seriously enough to make sure that you're being consistent. Sorry, that one just got me, because it's like, do it right or don't do it at all. Like, that's just the way how I feel.
Or just give reasons why it works with some people and not others. Like, does it have to do with blood type, or is it because they're on crack? Like, what what is it? Because that begs the question that if he takes on the personality of a crack addict, does he then start seeking out crack? Like,
wasn't there a zombie show like that though, where that girl ate brains and like she took on the personality of like whoever she ate or something like that?
iZombie.
Yeah.
I started watching it. I haven't finished it.
I haven't finished it either. I got bored pretty quickly. But yeah,
Go ahead, Sheena.
I don't necessarily feel like it's the vampires that change as much as the psychology of the people like who are writing about the vampires change. So yes, in the beginning, you have these vampires who are evil and scary, like my type of vampires. But the people who are writing, they've also grown. So when they're like 16, 17, and you're writing in your notebook about, oh my gosh, this vampire does X. By the time you're 25, 30, you've gained experience, you've gained empathy, you've gained a completely new knowledge base that you didn't have access to at that time. So right now in our history, we have access to psychology. We are all privy to different types of mental illness. We understand that we have to have empathy for things, and we understand when you don't have that empathy, something is wrong. So while people are building these vampires, they're also taking on the attitudes and desires of the person that's writing. So it may not necessarily be that they can't be called vampires anymore. It's probably more of the person who was writing is like, this is the vampire that I'm writing, and this is what this vampire is going to do. It may not necessarily be what a vampire is, but I'm giving them more human traits to make them more relatable to myself because I'm writing them. So it is now 10:11, and surprisingly, through all of us talking, we have actually went through every item on that list, which is super weird for us because we never do that. So high five you for. And Miss Amanda, would you like to tell everybody about your book really quickly?
Yeah, so I just happen to have it right here. Okay, so basically it's America 2022. So I'm sure you gathered from what I was saying, there are vampires and they are out of the coffin. The president of the United States is a vampire, witches are real, and they are also, I don't know, not out of the coffin, but I describe it as kind of having their glow up where they're just out and about and everybody knows that they're witches. Drugs are also legal. And it follows 21-year-old Mercury. He is a Black witch living in Los Angeles, and he just kind of wants to do his thing. And there's an ages-old feud between witches and vampires, which kind of, he just doesn't want to be a part of it. He just wants to become a musician and learn how to do tattoos and go get burritos at midnight with his friends. And after making a powerful enemy at a party, he and his friends have to leave Los Angeles amidst, some riots and go to what's called Astera, which is an annual gathering of all witches. And they go there for safety. It's where his father's at. It's where this huge collective of power is. And along the way, because it's a cross-country road trip, they battle vampire cops, evil witches, aggressive humans, and then they're also fighting each other to make it one piece. And, you know, will they make it one piece, or will they fall prey to the laws that spell their destruction? Yes, pun intended there. So you can get my book on Amazon. It is also, you can get it Barnes & Noble for your Nook. You can also get it on Bookshop. And yeah, that's my book in a nutshell. It's the first of a 3-part series.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The painting behind you at the kiss is the soft clamp.
Yes.
Okay. I was just like, I saw the bottom. I was like, that's like good stuff. Thank you for answering that question that had nothing to do with the amazingness that you just told us. I appreciate you taking the time to do that.
No problem.
So, does any of you ladies like to leave them with a parting words of wisdom about writing for vampires and werewolves?
Write what you want to see. Not everybody's going to agree, but if it's what you enjoy and what your audience will enjoy, then just write it.
Basically. Man. Like seriously, people get like in the groups, some of the groups that we're in, people tend to get caught up in like what everybody else is writing or how they should write their own characters and stuff like that. Nobody can write like you can. Nobody can come in. They can imitate your style, but that's something that you have to learn for yourself. And the only way you do it is by writing more.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. If you ask questions like that and not worry about so much, especially what people are putting out there and how often they're putting out there, but you just write authentically what you want. I know that's not vampires, but it's still like that's some of the best writing advice I got. Just write authentically you. And the only way you can do that is by continuously to write. Even if it sucks, even if it's horrible. Like I didn't like writing short stories. So I found like groups to who did nothing but write short stories, and we wrote short stories together. I didn't know how to write sex scenes, so I did sextop or something. And I started writing erotica for a minute. So it's just like the only way you can do it is to get better. Read your favorite authors, take notes in those books, and read their how-to books, and then of course just write. So.
I agree with all of that. I think it's also important when you're writing, I would say anything, but most especially when you're writing something that is like fantastical creatures with abilities or something, that you just keep in mind the world that you're creating and be consistent. You know, obviously your first draft is going to be your first draft, okay? And you're going to just get it done. That's the whole point of it. So don't focus so much on that in the first draft. When it comes to rewrites, when you're sending it to beta readers, when you're doing all of that stuff, you have in mind and the consistency. So the rules you set forth in chapter 1, even if you decide to write your vampire sparkly, make sure that you keep that same energy by the end of the book. Mm-hmm. And not only will that make your character stronger, but your fans, because you will get fans and the people that love your book, will appreciate that consistency. Because as you've seen here, we all have had moments where we've watched stuff and things have not been consistent and we have been mad. So just be consistent, but again, that will come with, you know, don't focus so much on it in the first draft. Create your rules and have fun with that.
I'm just waving at Cassandra. She's saying good night.
Yes, good night.
Good night.
I like having a theme for my book. Like I would typically take 3 words that sums up the whole book, and I would like write them somewhere, probably like in the front of my journal with potential names and stuff like that. And I just keep that there for like whenever it gets sidetracked, I kind of look back at it and be like, oh yeah, this is what this book was about. Mm-hmm. It was this such a thing. So sometimes that helps too.
Yeah, I mean, for my book, like there's kind of layers. There's the magic aspect of it. There's the road trip aspect of it. There's the political aspect of it, because this book has some politics weaved into it. And then there are the vampires. So I basically ended up writing 3 kind of world building outlines where I'm talking about the magic system, I'm talking about, you know, the main thread of the story, the road trip, and then also talking about the politics of it and what's going to happen in the world and what does it mean when you're elected president, what happens there, the electoral college, you're appointing Supreme Court justices, what does that look like? How do you pass a bill? All that kind of stuff. And I think doing that research can be really, really fun. I am a research nerd and I live for it. So that's also something that can be helpful too. Like, don't be afraid to do some research.
And know that your side characters have lives when they're not in front of your main characters, which is like so important, because like that gives them depth when they come on to scene, when they come into the scene. Like, it's like, what have you been doing? Well, Tony was over here like macking on some girl, but it adds to it builds their character though, when you know what they're doing outside of the scene that they're in. So if Amanda and Jocelyn is over here preparing the dinner, it's like, okay, well, what are the werewolves back there doing, even though they're not in scene? You know, do the ladies hear them roughhousing? Like, are they fighting? Like, anything like that. And you don't even have to put it inside your book, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah. And that I think also comes from you caring about all of your characters. Like, giving a shit about all of your characters, even the problematic ones, will show in your writing. Because if you don't care about your characters, you're not going to care to give them a fully fleshed out life. And then you're going to have a situation where they're just there to serve the main character and drive their path forward. And nobody wants that, because, you know, there are a lot of, like, I'm sure we all have those books and stories where we're not even that much of a fan of the main character. It's that side character who we are living for that we're like, I need to see this person. Screw you, Bella. Where's the other person? You know, like for me in True Blood, it was Lafayette and Tara. Like, I you cool, but like I want to see what's happening with them. And they did such a great job of making their lives so like rich that it did give you like people to root for. And so that's just something also to keep in mind.
Well, like, it's so hard because y'all are dropping all these gems and I'm like, y'all, it's late. These people probably need to go to bed. Okay, everyone, thank y'all so much and have an amazing night.
Bye. Good night.
Thank you, Amanda. We appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.